All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today's lesson is going to be about the after effects of the Article of Confederation. Last lesson, we talked about how ineffective it was and how it sucked, and basically how everyone in our country was like, we need to redo this. We need a start over because there was a lot of problems that came because of the Articles of Confederation, and now we have to create something better. Okay, so just a fair warning: throughout this lesson, I may not sound as good. I may not sound as on point. I might be stopping for a second or two, maybe in the video, because again, as you can see, I no longer in Stanford. Um, I did my chemo, so I'm not completely 100%. And sometimes get out of breath quickly, and sometimes it's hard for me to, continue on. So I'm doing it as much as I can, as far as I can, and I take my breaks when I need to, and things like that. Okay, so if there's a problem, you can understand something. Um, First off, I do apologize. And secondly, uh, you may want to ask Mr. Rivera to maybe explain it for you a little bit more, or with somebody around you. Because again, I do apologize if you cannot understand me, or if something gets lost along the way and you miss out on that. Okay, so again, I do apologize. I'm trying my best to give you my all. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the objectives. Now, we're going to analyze the Constitutional Convention, basically what happened and who was there. Then we're going to take the reasoning and agreement of the Three-Fifths Compromise. This thing, um, it helped, but it hurt our country. And the way it hurt it is going to be basically our focus um, for the rest of this grading period and the next grading period, because of one thing, because of this, it's a cause and effect. And this is the issue that's kicked down the road. Nobody wants to solve it. Nobody wants to deal with it. They're just like, well, let the next group of people, the next generation, try to solve this problem. And then we're going to develop a logical argument on whether our founding fathers would be pleased the way things are going in our country right now. Okay. Again, they saw that the Articles of Confederation wasn't working, and now they did this constitutional convention, and they think everything's going to be great. But if they were to see now, what do you think how would they would react? Okay. So speaking of which, here is your warm up picture. So you got three people there. You got Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, you know, and they're looking down on Congress. Okay. So what do you think this artist is trying to say about Congress and how our founding fathers basically viewed it? Like based off the artist's depiction, does it look like they're thinking, "Hey, this is just how we envisioned it," or things have gotten better, things have gotten worse? They look, you know, disheartened? Do they look like optimistic? I mean, what do you think? Okay, so pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So in May 1787, every state except for Rhode Island, the smallest state in our union, sent delegates to Philadelphia for the sole purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. Remember, this document is what our country is running on. So even though everyone knows it sucks, it's not working, it's what's making our country run right now. So these guys all got together and basically like, we need a new document, something that will be better and that will replace the articles. But until they actually replace it, the Articles of Confederation and all the problems that caused because of it is still going on in our country. Okay, so I want you to understand that even though these guys are all together and talk about how what we could do to fix our country, problems in our country are still going on. Okay, now right when they get there, right off the back, they quickly decide, you know what? There's no point of revising the Articles of Confederation. We need to just take that, crush it up, toss it, and start a whole new framework for a government. Now, in total, there were 55 delegates that were there, and some of these guys are like the all stars of the time, especially in this country, you know. And this was known as the Constitutional Convention. Now, the thing is, right off the back, they're like, okay, we need a leader. Somebody, everybody, all 55 people are going to listen to. And when this person talks, everyone's going to listen. And they say something, everyone's going to shut up and basically say, okay, acknowledge this person as, yeah, you are the leader. You're commanding everything. But who's that person going to be? And right off the back, everyone like turns back and looks towards George Washington. Washington is like the only person besides like Ben Franklin who can command the respect from everyone. Okay, from small states to big states, some of that. It had to be one of those two guys. But everyone knew. Okay, Ben Franklin's pretty old, but Washington he's the man. So they look to him and they're like, "Will you lead us?" And he's like, "Yeah, I gotcha. I'll be the presiding officer." Now, like I said, there were other famous people there. Like I said, Ben Franklin was there. And again, he would have been another really good person to be the presiding leader. But again, he was older, you know, and yeah, he was no world round and things like that. But still, it had to be Washington. Okay. Another really famous person that was there was Alexander Hamilton. People really liked him. Not everyone, but there was a lot of people who respected him. And then you had other people like James Madison, who was pretty young but very knowledgeable, very smart, and the words he used were just like, "Dang, this guy's good," you know. All right, so all the delegates are get together, and they start the meeting, and they basically say they all come to an agreement on three things. One, that the government needs to have the power to collect taxes because a lot of these problems that the country is going through at that time, while they're having their convention, is that they can't collect taxes, they can't pay their debt, they can't pay their bills, and the recession, the it's just getting bad and bad, worse and worse for the country, and it's just barely getting on its feet. You know, the other thing was that the laws had to be binding upon the states. States couldn't say, well, you know what, I don't like that federal law, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to make sure my people don't follow it. No, no, no. Once a law is made for the land of the country, the whole country, every state had to accept it. Okay. The last part is the government should be broken up. It shouldn't be just one entity, one big group. It should be separated into three groups, three branches, if you will. Okay. Now, those are the three things they agreed on. Everything else was a total fight and disagreement and argument on. So many issues popped up and they were just arguing. One of the biggest ones that came up was this: should each state be equal in Congress? Now, what I mean by that is this: a state like Rhode Island, tiny, compared to New York, which is huge, should they both be equal in power? Now, some people said yes, yes, every state should be equal to another state. So small states like Rhode Island loved it. They're like, yeah, exactly, we should. because they felt that was fair. Wait, we're a state. We should be equal to you, New York. And other states like New York, Pennsylvania, big states were like, okay, wait, hold on. We have like a ton of people. Let's say we have 100,000 people. Rhode Island only has 5,000. 100,000 versus 5,000. That's not equal. So you're basically saying that those people, those 5,000 people in that small state, have more say so, have more power in their voice than a state that has more people? That makes no sense. That's stupid. So that's where the argument came from. Big states versus small states, and where's the balance? So this guy right here in this picture, that's Roger Sherman. He was from Connecticut and he says, guys, I got an idea. We'll make Congress a bicameral, meaning two houses. You should remember that because I just talked about that in a couple lessons ago. He says, okay, in one house, we'll call it the House of Representatives. States will get power based on their population. So a big state will have more power in the House of Representatives, and a small states will get less power. But in the other house, which we'll call the Senate, every state's going to have two senators, and you get two senators regardless of how big or small you are. Now, in order for anything to pass Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate have to agree on it. That way, it doesn't go like, oh, well, because the bigger states agreed to it, they win, and that's it. No, no. Now the Senate has to agree to it. And if the small states do agree, then whatever the law or whatever it may be, it passes. So he's like, this is a fair way for both sides. Congress will be split into two houses, House of Representatives and the Senate. And people were like, I like that. That's a great idea. It became known as the Great Compromise or the Connecticut Compromise. Now, Roger Sherman's feeling good. He's like, heck yeah, I solved this problem. Problem is, he actually opened up Pandora's box. He actually made things a little bit worse in our country because he shined light at the elephant in the room, the thing that nobody really wanted to talk about. And that thing that nobody really wanted to talk about was slavery. Now, the thing is, state population and slavery, that was a big thing. Because remember, in the House of Representatives, the more people you have, the more power you get. Now, in the South, there was a lot of slaves. So the people in the South said, you know what? Every slave should count as a person. Yes, they should count as a person because they are a person. Now, to you and me, the average person, you hear that, you're like, yeah, that's good. That's good that they count them as a whole person. They recognize them as a person. Here's the thing, they didn't mean it. They could care less. They didn't treat their slaves like people. They didn't even believe in human rights for slaves. They felt that they were here and slaves were down here, that they were beneath them, like dogs. Okay? So I know a lot of times students, when I go through this, they tend to think, well, yeah, they're whole people, so duh, aren't they counting them as whole people? Because again, they count the slaves as whole people, those slave states are going to get more power, and then they're going to make sure that the slavery stays, you know, the way it is for years to come. Now, the northern states, the states that hated slavery, said no, you don't treat them like people. You don't believe they have rights like people, so they should not count as people. So, unless you're going to free them, you should not count them. And this is where the whole argument comes up. Where do you count a slave as? Are they a quarter of a person, three-quarters of a person, half? Now, the whole time these guys are arguing on what's the percentage you should count a slave, you have to remember the country is going through turmoil. People are not following laws, bills aren't being paid, people are getting upset, losing their homes, there's uprisings, and prices on things are fluctuating, being really expensive, and then to sell things, it's like really low. It's just chaos. So during this time, these guys are trying to figure out a compromise. Okay, where can we negotiate? And they finally settle on 3/5. So for every 5 slaves, they counted as 3 people. Now the North agreed to this, but they had some stipulations. They said, well, we want to do some things against slavery, make sure that you guys don't take advantage and things like that. So the South said, okay, but we want to make sure some things too, because we need slavery. So they basically said that they can't ban the slave trade until 1808 or impose taxes on the imports of slaves. They can't put the high tax on them. So each side was like, okay, they weren't happy, but they weren't like, oh, we didn't come out with that with anything. They each kind of got something that they wanted, you know, and that's what a compromise is. Okay. Now, now that that's settled, now it comes to the nitty gritty stuff of the government, the fine details. So the delegates agreed that the people ruled the government. It's not the rich. It's not oh, my family's been here since like 1500, 1600. I have more say so than you. No. The power of the government comes from the people through popular sovereignty. They felt the representative system would be best. That, hey, people elect a representatives, and that representatives goes to Congress and goes to the Senate, House of Representatives, whatever, and represents the people that live in their area, their district. Okay. The other thing they agreed on was a federalism, that the power of the central government should be divided between the federal, which is the national government, and state government. So it shouldn't be just one clump of government. There's different parts of it. There's the federal, the state, and the local. Okay. Now, excuse me. The other thing they said it was power. Well, which branch should be more powerful? Which branch should do this? Well, this is where they figured it should be distributed. There shouldn't be like one extremely strong branch, but there also shouldn't be one really weak branch either. Okay, so they said basically like, okay, let's make it like this. Congress, they make laws. Okay, their main purpose is to make laws. The president, the executive branch, which they didn't call the president yet, they just called the executive branch, they enforce the laws. They make sure that the laws are being followed by the people and stuff like that. And then the Supreme Court, the judicial branch. These guys basically look at the laws. Does it violate any rights? So when Congress passes the law, the president makes sure that it's being followed. The If someone says, "Hey, my rights are being violated by this law," the judicial branch looks at the law and says, "Yeah, this person's rights being violated," or "No, they're not." Okay, they are the ultimate decision makers of that. Now, just to double check and make sure that no one side is more powerful than the other, the founding fathers actually did a pretty cool and interesting thing called checks and balances, to where if the president does something, Congress can make sure that they're actually doing their job and that they're not getting too powerful, getting away with things. You know, So a great example is this. Let's say Congress makes a law, okay? And the president has to sign off on that law saying, yeah, we're going to enforce that law, okay? If the president doesn't like it, he can veto it and say, I don't like this for whatever reason, you know? And he says, no, I veto it. So he kills it, right? Now, when the president vetoes and kills a bill, it's not completely dead yet. Because what happens is, under the checks and balances, if this is a law that Congress really believes in and feels that the people want or need, they can override the president. Now, is it an easy process? Heck no, it's hard. But if they get the 2/3 majority vote from both the House of Representatives and the Senate, if they get the 2/3 majority and the bill hasn't been rewritten or anything like that, then it becomes law. The president can't veto it again. So again, just because the president says no, no, I don't like that veto, it doesn't mean he's the ultimate power. And that's what this checks and balances does. Make sure the president can't just say, "Oh, I'm the king. I whatever goes my way." No, and that's why they have these things to make sure that kind of stuff happens. So um, I would really look study this chart because again, it is fascinating, and this is really how our government works today. Okay. Another really big one too is like, let's say a president gets really chingon and he thinks he's all above the law, and he does corrupt things. Congress can actually impeach him, kick him out, and it's not just the president they can impeach. They can impeach other congressmen, other senators, House of Representative members, even judges. If they find, hey, this guy's been corrupt, he's taken advantage of his position and power and things like that. So, yeah, okay. So, this to me is truly the genius of the Constitution. The delegates, remember, these guys are in 1787, you know, they're way back old. They know this. They know that just like all smart people know, that they don't know everything. All right. And they knew future generations might look at the Constitution and say, this needs to change because times change, people change, points of view change. So, what they did is they added a clear way to add or make changes to the Constitution called amendments. Okay. Now, thing is, these amendments are not easy to do. Okay. So it was basically like if people really want this change, then they'll get it done. But if it's something that just because all these people are in power, this political group, and they want to make changes, oh, they can make changes. No. It's going to take a large majority of the country to vote to get these changes made. Okay. That's why they did that. Okay. And there's a two-step process called proposal and ratification. Okay. So we're going to stop there today because, again, this is a long, I just realized the time too. This is a pretty long lecture. I do apologize for it being long, but there's so much that went on in this constitutional convention to get our country back on its feet, you know. And that's where this question comes in for you. Do you think our founding fathers would be pleased the way our country is right now? How we started, back then with you know, how things were going just so bad, and the country couldn't even collect taxes, couldn't make people follow the laws and things like that. If they were alive now, George Washington, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, Ben Franklin, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, if those guys were alive today and they saw how our country is, do you think they'd be happy? What do you think? In your personal opinion, do you think they would be happy? And explain why. And do you think they'd be just like, these guys did a good job? Or do you think they'd be like, man, they took something, a great idea, and they just, they crushed and burned it? So, where do you think? Okay. Um, Once you're done with this lesson, you're done for, well, once you're done with the question, you're done with the lesson. So I apologize for that. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Um, Again, if something happened along the way you don't understand, please let um, Mr. Rivera know, or someone around you if they were able to catch it or understand it a little bit better. But again, I do apologize if it was my fault if my voice wasn't as loud, or if I may have skipped some things, because again, um, this chemo is it's no joke. Okay, so with that being said, guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.